Over here, it looks heavy. Can I put this on the truck for you?
No, just put it down by the front door. That's more than enough.
Hey, and I'll help you with that bag, okay? My glasses.
Oh, can't you see without them?
Not very well.
Right. Gotcha. Look, why don't you just hand me that bag over there and I'll be on my way?
No, I think this is our grocery bag.
Right. Gotcha. Yeah, well, I have trouble with my eyes, too. It's a curse, ain't it?
Yeah, right. I put the stuff by the door. I wouldn't leave it there too long. Someone could run off with it. Yeah, you know, there was a burglary here just a few weeks ago.
What gets into folks? Well, thanks a million. There's one thing I hate. It's making 2 trips.
Yeah, well, Merry Christmas, Santa.
Santa? Oh, right. Gotcha. Thanks, Dancer. Thanks, Prancer. Merry Christmas. Ho, ho, ho.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Boy, doesn't that make you feel good, giving that fellow a hand with his work?
Yes, it does, Raj. That's what I call a real good deed. Helping others to help themselves.
And he's a nice guy, too.
Oh, yeah.
And we helped him carry them out. How dumb can you get? It's lucky we didn't get here earlier. With us helping, he'd have the couch and the chair.
I brought the stuff, Shirley. Oh, thanks, Dee. Put it on the table. Okay. Hi, guys.
Hey, Dee.
Hi, Dee.
Working on your Christmas list, Raj?
No, Dee, I did all my shopping.
That's smart, before the Christmas rush.
Not so smart. It was also before the Christmas burglary.
Well, that's what he's doing now, Dee. He's making a list of the things that were stolen.
Good idea, but the problem is you forget things. What you should do is wait till they capture the burglar and get his list. I mean, his will be much better. He's got all the stuff right there in front of him.
Dwayne, your head would make a good motel. There'd always be a vacancy.
Hey, guys, what's new about the burglary?
Nothing, but we did give a description of the burglar to Detective Barnett, so all we can do is hope for the best.
All right. Come and help me, Dee.
All right.
Hi, Raj. Dwayne Rerun. Hi, guys.
Hey, little Earl.
Hi, sweetheart.
Hello, little Earl.
You look terrific, baby.
You sure come on strong for a guy that's only up to my kneecap.
This is nothing. I haven't made my real move yet.
Little Earl, maybe you should find somebody your own size.
There is nobody my size.
Hey, little Earl, how's your father doing on our burglary case?
Oh, yeah, I got so hung up on my old lady here, I forgot. He's been trying to find you.
He has? Why? Has he caught that burglar?
Maybe. He has somebody that fits the description, and he wants you two to go down to the station and take a look at him. He's been calling your apartment all day.
Come on, Rerun, we'll call Big Earl and tell him we're on our way.
Oh, okay, fellas. Now, you know what's required here. We're going to bring in some suspects. I want you to look them over very carefully. Now, if you see our man, I want you to tell me.
Don't worry, Detective Barnett. I know that guy anywhere.
Hey, so would I.
Hey, that's him. That's the guy. That's the creep.
You mean Reverend Morgan?
Reverend?
He's the police chaplain. Hello, Reverend.
Hello, Detective.
Reverend, of course. Such a kind, nice face.
Rerun, be more careful.
That's right. Now take your time. We don't want to convict an innocent man. Just make sure you can make a positive identification.
Okay, we'll be careful.
Okay. Send him in. Put your hands down. Put your hands down.
That guy in the middle looks familiar, Raj. I think he's our man.
Could be, but I'm not...
Hey, Raj, you guys picked that criminal right out of the lineup, huh?
Oh, yeah, Dwayne. No problem. I just hope the police can get our coffee maker back. I'm tired of fried Sanka.
You know what I miss most? The TV set.
Rerun, what are you watching?
Well, in the Stevens apartment, they have Columbo on. And the Fosters are watching Rich Man, Poor Man. And in the Simpsons apartment, it's the Newlywed Game.
The Simpsons don't have a TV set.
Right. Nosy. Shoosh. Man, what are we gonna do all night? We have no TV, no radio, and no record player.
Well, we should be getting all our stuff back now that we've identified the burglar.
Yeah, are you sure you got the right guy?
Sure, of course I'm sure. Once I meet somebody, I never forget them.
Me too. I have a great memory.
Hi, am I late?
For what?
You asked me over for Christmas eggnog. Don't you remember?
Yeah, I must have forgotten all the excitement, Shirley. Come on in, baby. Hey, hi, guys. Come on, help me with this egg now, okay?
Can I open your refrigerator?
You know, this is the season to be jolly, right? Okay. Tis the season to be jolly. Tra-la-la-la-la-la-la-la.
Yeah, this is the season to be jolly. Hey, what kind of guy would go around stealing at Christmas?
Maybe that's how he gets his jollies. Sorry.
Well, what kind of guy was he? I mean, what did he look like?
Oh, he was about 5'8". Yeah, about that tall, 5'8" or 11.
Yeah. What color was his eyes?
Brown.
Well, how about his hair?
Brown. I mean brown.
Black, I mean, gray.
Look here, are you sure you two turkeys went to the same lineup?
Well, now, the truth is, it was dark in the hallway when we saw that burglar. And I did drop my glasses. I'm afraid I didn't get a good look at him. Well, you saw him, Rerun.
Hey, don't try to lay that on me, Raj. I was downstairs most of the time. When I did come upstairs, he had an apple in his mouth, and he had a sack, you know, kind of, covering his face.
Oh.
No, I'm not so sure.
Me neither.
And we were wrong about him being the only one who wore that jacket.
Hey, look, well, 'tis the season to be jolly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, wait a minute. You know what, guys? I got something heavy for you to deal with.
What's that, Shirley?
I think you might have sent an innocent man to jail. For Christmas.
Wow.
But better him than me.
I gotta get this to the receiver.
Excuse me, Sergeant.
Yeah. Here, fill out this arrest report. Where'd you get this guy on, Lieutenant? Huh? Oh, it's Mad Dog Jackson. He's a mean one. We better put him in isolation.
Just a minute, I'm not a lieutenant.
And I'm not Mad Dog Jackson.
And you're not a lieutenant. And he's not Mad Dog Jackson.
No?
Well, you better not put him in isolation. It's lonely there. You'd hate it.
Well, anyway, we came for Detective Barnett.
Oh, Barnett? Sure, hang on. I'll get him for you.
Thank you, sir.
Gee, Raj, he thought I was a criminal.
Yeah, and he thought I was a police officer.
It just goes to show you that even an experienced professional can make a mistake.
That's right, and we're amateurs, so it's a good thing we came back here to double check.
These guys are here to see you, Barnett.
Hey, Raj.
Hey, big girl.
Good. Con man, heister, petty larceny, smash and grab.
Smash and grab? Isn't that a game show?
But Big Earl, do you really think the guy we identified is the burglar?
I sure do. I'd say yes, without a doubt. What do you think, Sarge?
Are you kidding? We're dealing with facts here. This guy's got a record. Breaking and entering, petty theft, everything fits. We're dealing with solid evidence. Facts, facts, facts.
Well, guys,
Well, I guess we may as well go home, Raj, and leave everything to the police.
I think you're right. See you later, guys.
Oh, and here's the thing that really convinced me.
What was that?
The guy's a Virgo, but his moon's in Capricorn. Bad news.
Yeah, but lots of folks say, right, gotcha.
Right.
Gotcha.
it won't work, Willie. These young men picked you out of a lineup. They're just here to double check.
Yeah, he does look like the guy we saw.
Sure. Look, here's your signed statement. You said the suspect was about 5'10"?
A lot of guys are 5'10". There must be millions and millions of guys 5'10" in China alone, right?
Right.
And you stated he had a nervous, jumpy way of talking?
We sure did, and he sure does.
Oh, yeah, I remember that. There's no doubt in my mind now. He's the guy.
He sure is. I'm glad we had a chance to hear you talk. That was a dead giveaway.
Okay, that's it. Sergeant, take him away.
Right, gotcha. Right.
Not again.
I'm afraid so. See, we came here to make a positive identification, and we're not sure.
Sure. Right.
Hey, Raj, have you figured out what you're gonna put on our Christmas cards?
Yeah, just about. How does this sound? We wish you a Merry Christmas and lots of Yuletide cheer. Somebody stole your present. Better luck next year. What do you think?
Nice, Raj. Real sentimental. Merry Christmas.
Well, at least we don't have to worry about Willie Spencer being locked up in jail away from his friends and family during the holidays.
Raj, look what just came down the chimney.
Ho, 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 and a suck in your fireplace.
Wow, Mrs. Santa Claus. How are things at the North Pole?
Well, I would have been here sooner, but have you ever tried to put on a pair of frozen pantyhose? Child, let me tell you, that'll put a yeah in your ho-ho-ho.
Hey, well, come on in and thaw out Mrs. Santa Claus.
Well, I can't stay too long because I'm helping out at the mission.
Oh, yeah?
Hey, come on in, the labs.
Hey, Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas, guys.
Christmas. Hey.
Ho, ho, ho.
Where should we put your presents?
Well, under the tree where the presents for you guys used to be.
All right, move it, the labs. Come on, move it.
Hey, sweet cakes. How about opening my present now? I want to be on hand in case you throw your arms around me in gratitude.
Okay, how can I resist that smile?
It's Eau d'Amour, the perfume of love.
This is it?
That's all I can afford.
Well, that's sweet, little Earl. Thanks.
Wow, it worked. What a Christmas.
Willie, what were you doing in our bedroom?
Hey, you watch him, guys. I'll go check.
Ain't no about it, doubt it now, Willie. You a crook.
I ain't no crook. I was just on my way to church, and I saw this fire escape. So I decided to take a shortcut through your bedroom.
My, this turkey sure is busy. He even works holidays.
Hey, how about that? A holiday turkey.
Is Dee's present? Is Shirley?
Yeah, Little Earl and Big Earl. And here's the one I got for you, Raj. Hey, but I don't recognize this one. To the guys in apartment 3A from the guy who took your stuff away.
It's from me. I picked it up at a hardware store. I bought it.
Right, gotcha.
You know what, Willie? You're all right.
Yeah, you all right, Willie.
Yeah. I bet if there were more criminals like Willie Spencer, jail would be a much nicer place.
Speaking of jail,
That's right. He was just taking a shortcut through our bedroom on his way to church.
Oh, come all ye faithful, joyful and triumph.
Come on, what do you say, big girl?
what can I tell you? Have an eggnog.
Hey, Willie, do you know this one? Dashing through the snow.
In a one-horse open sleigh, over the fields we go, laughing all the way. Hey, hey, hey! Some bobtails ring, making spirits rise. Oh, it is to ride and sing a sleighing song tonight. Jingle bell, jingle bell, jingle all the way. Don't forget to put the lock on now. All right, good night.
See you, big girl. Merry Christmas.
Bye, Shirley.
Wow, that turned out to be some party, huh, Rod?
Yeah, sure did. And didn't Willie turn out to be quite a guy?
Yeah, he was real nice.
You imagine him giving us a gift. Hey, speaking of presents, Raj, you haven't opened the present I got you.
Yeah, and you haven't opened mine either.
Neither one of you have opened mine.
Well, I guess we can wait till tomorrow.
Yeah, we can wait till tomorrow.
Yeah, we'll just wait till tomorrow.
Do you want to wait till tomorrow?
No, let's get him now.
All right, first, this is my present to you, Rerun.
Come on, open it up. Well, it's already been open, Raj.
Huh?
It's empty, Raj.
Empty? A beautiful sweater should be in there. How could it be empty?
Well, wait a minute, it's not quite empty. There's a note in here. Sorry, nobody's perfect. Signed, Willie Spencer. Willie! Shirley, we want to order.
All right. Hey, is this to go?
You have to go in my mouth. What's on the diet plate?
Cottage cheese and peaches.
Well, slide them off and put on a cheeseburger and fish fries. What's happening, right?
What's happening is the weekend is almost here, and I have a very big date with Cindy.
All right.
Oh, come on, Raj. You'll never get anywhere with Cindy. The last time you took her to the drive-in, you couldn't even get her to take off her seatbelt.
That's past history, Rerun. I was a high school kid then. Now I'm a college man with a new analytical approach that can't fail.
What's that?
Dwayne, my man, I have finally perfected the Thomas technique. It makes me irresistible to women.
The Thomas technique.
That's right. First, there is the music. Then the candlelight. Then the wine and the roses.
Oh, wait a minute, go slow. I want to remember this. Go ahead.
Okay. Wine and the roses. Okay. Then with the mellow sounds of Barry White.
Come on, baby. Right on, right on.
Right on, right on.
I move her over to the couch where we get more comfortable.
Oh, yeah, more comfortable. Uh-oh.
I offer her some wine, dim the lights, propose a toast,
All right.
perhaps a bit of romantic poetry. How do I love thee? Let me count the way.
Count. Does this involve math?
Okay, then I turn the conversation around to her. I compliment her on her shapely legs, her trim ankle, and her small little feet.
Do you have anything in a tan loafer?
Shirley, this is really serious now.
Oh, excuse me.
Hey, I guarantee you, by this time she'll be putty in my hands.
Yeah, you are silly, Polly.
Believe me, Saturday cannot miss.
Saturday? Raj, I have a date with April Saturday night.
April?
Yeah, April Dawn, an actress I met while I was working as an usher on that new soap opera, The Young and the Thoughtless. We're supposed to have an intimate dinner for 2 Saturday night.
Well, you still can. Here at Rob's place.
No way.
Rerun, I've got to have the apartment. I mean, this is it.
How can you tell that this is it?
Rerun, where women are concerned, I have a sixth sense. Oh, well, Dee, what are you doing here? Now, we're trying to have an adult conversation.
Well, keep trying. You're only 5 years away.
Oh, April, I was just thinking about you.
Hi, Rerun. I missed you at the studio.
April, I want you to meet some friends of mine. This is Dee and Roger Thomas and Dwayne Nelson.
Hello.
Haven't we met before? I mean, you look very familiar.
Oh, well, you've probably seen me on that pantyhose commercial on TV. You know, the one with all the dancing legs? My legs are 3rd and 4th from the left. Or are they 5th and 6th?
No, those are the 3rd and the 4th.
Dwayne. All right, you all gonna order anything?
I played a waitress once. It was last season on Kojak. I took Telly Savalas's order. I use the method.
Oh, yeah? Well, I use the pad and the pencil. Call me when you're ready to order.
Rerun, I just dropped by to tell you that it will have to be a late date Saturday night. I have a meeting at the Actors Guild. Will 10 o'clock be all right, Rerun?
Well, okay.
Good. Well, I must run along now. It was very nice meeting you all. Ciao.
Ciao, I thought you weren't hungry.
Dear child.
Dear chow? Don't you know what chow means?
It's a dog food, isn't it?
Oh, no. Chow means goodbye in stuck-up land.
Hey, well, if she can't make it to the apartment before 10, our problems are solved. I'll take it from 8 to 10. You can have it from 10 on.
A 2-hour date, that's not much time, Raj.
Dwayne, with the Thomas technique, 2 hours is more than enough time.
All right. Saturday night is going to be the night of all nights.
Oh!
Now, why are you oohing? Now, you don't even know what we're talking about.
Yes, I do. You're talking about making out in the apartment.
Ooh! Oh, April. Oh, April. April.
Rerun.
April. Oh, hi, Raj.
Well, how did it go?
Oh, man, I'm all worn out. That was some date. Oh, April. Oh, rerun. Come in.
Hey, what's happening?
Excuse me if I don't get up. My knees are still weak.
Oh, wow.
You know, Dwayne, I didn't do so bad either. My lips are still numb.
No. Oh, wow.
Well, we kissed, we touched, we caressed, and then we reached that moment of truth.
Moment of truth?
Dwayne, now you've kissed a girl, haven't you?
Uh-huh.
And you've touched a girl, haven't you?
Uh-huh.
And you've caressed a girl, haven't you?
Uh-huh.
Then you must have reached the moment of truth.
Dwayne.
All right, wait a minute. You guys tell me about it, and don't leave out any of the details.
Dwayne. A gentleman, a true gentleman. A sensitive, mature man does not discuss the private, intimate details of his love life.
Struck out, huh?
She was all over me the minute she hit the door. She was wearing a tight blue sweater and a long, slinky skirt.
Oh, wow.
The romantic atmosphere of our apartment got to her the second she walked in the door.
What a dump.
What it needs is a woman's touch. She couldn't keep her hands off me. I fell for her right away. She was impressed with my many showbiz connections.
Are you really Stevie Wonder's second cousin?
Yeah, and my first cousin is Richard Pryor. But she wasn't interested in all that. She just wanted me for myself.
I want you to introduce me to Stevie and Richard.
We can talk about that later. I hate to mix business and pleasure. So let's get down to business.
You're right. I'm glad you reminded me. I have to read tomorrow, and I need your help.
You want me to teach you to read?
No, I'm reading for a part, and I want to rehearse a few little lines.
Anthony and Cleopatra?
I play Cleopatra.
This could take all night. Why don't we just skip lights and camera and go right to action? And then it happened. She stood up and said those 3 words that every man wants to hear.
I'm going home.
She called me her Anthony and said she was my Cleopatra.
Wow, what does that mean?
I guess you never read the Bible.
Yeah, that's not bad, Rerun, for a first date.
Wow, Raj, you mean you had even better time than Rerun?
Are you kidding? Comparing me to Rerun is like comparing Billy D. Williams to a bowl of warm Jell-O.
All right, Raj, let's hear it, man.
All right. I don't like to brag, but the Thomas technique could be the greatest thing for romance since the drive-in movie.
I immediately set the atmosphere with the proper lighting.
Turn the lights back on. I'm afraid of the dark.
I put on some mood music and I held her in my arms so we glided across the floor.
Why you keep looking at your watch?
It's just the time is so short and you are so beautiful. When I offered her a rose as a token of my affection, she couldn't contain herself. Her reaction was explosive.
I'm allergic to roses.
I poured the wine, not just any wine, but an experience for the palate, an ambrosia, an elixir of the gods, a little Granny Greenfield cranapple rosé. The wine did something to her.
Wine makes me throw up.
Okay. Cindy, why waste precious time? Now, I'm a man in love, and you are a woman. And we both want the same thing.
Marriage?
Perhaps we don't want the same thing.
Oh, Roger.
When you said you had something special planned for tonight, I had no idea it would be a proposal.
Neither did I.
Oh, Raj, just think, a cozy cottage, a fireplace, and just the 8 of us.
8 of us?
Well, yes, dear. I want 5 children.
That's 7.
And a maid.
That's 8. Cindy, I'm not ready for this.
Where are you going?
Not me.
But didn't you just say you loved me?
Absolutely, but that was moments ago before I realized I was a liar. In fact, you couldn't fit in the stadium.
Fit in the stadium?
Good one.
Well, you could fit in all right if they needed an extra flagpole.
Yourself at me.
And Cindy will throw herself at me.
I wish somebody would throw themselves at me. I'm so lonely.
The Thomas technique. Let me see if I have it down. Wine. Candlelight. Roses, roses, roses. Rose. And some mood music. Yes, right, music, music. Hi, Cindy, come on in.
Hello, Rerun.
Wow. I'm so glad we have some time together. I want to get to know you and I want to hear all about you.
Well, there really isn't much to tell. I go to LACC and I'm studying political science.
Oh, I'm really into politics. Tell me, what do you think of Bert Vance?
That's Lance.
Lance Vance?
No, Bert, Lance, or Cyrus Vance.
Then who is Lance Vance?
No one, Rerun, is Lance Vance.
Poor Lance Vance.
Oh, Rerun, you're so funny. Raj told me all about you.
Lies. All lies.
It was all good.
Oh, that's good old honest Raj for you. That's what we call him around here. You know he never tells a lie. Well, I guess I may as well face it, Dwayne. I can't compete with Raj. He has everything. Brains, looks, personality. Maybe I should get myself a new roommate. A real loser like myself. Do you think there's any room in San Clemente?
Hey, man, come on. You're coming down too hard on yourself.
Yeah, but I got nowhere with Cindy. And Raj not only got everywhere with her, he also did great with April.
Well, how can you be so sure?
Well, he didn't take her out to dinner, and he didn't take her to a movie, and he didn't buy her a present.
Yeah.
So why did she send him a thank you note?
All right, so he's a winner and you're a loser. Does that mean he's a winner and you're...
Keep it off the chairs.
Her hostility is probably just a result of the repressed passion she feels for me.
How would you like for me to repress your head into your neck? And get your feet off my chair?
Indigestion. Rerun, the man who can eat peanut butter and tuna fish pudding. Now, come on, Dwayne, what's bothering him?
You, Raj. See, man, he can't compete with you. He's not like you. I mean, he doesn't really have a technique.
And you are.
You're not?
Oh, the truth is, I struck out with Cindy, too. And all April did was talk about you.
Really?
She's crazy about you. She thinks you're magnificent.
Really?
Sure. She told me herself. There's nobody who can compare with you.
Oh, I wouldn't say nobody. There's Rudolph Valentino, Don Juan, Bossa Nova.
You know, Rerun, I think our approach was all wrong. We shouldn't treat women any differently from anyone else. So from now on, we're gonna be open, honest, and please, no more phony stories.
Right on. Hey. I just want to thank you for letting me use the apartment last night for my date.
Oh, yeah. How did it go?
Oh, sensational, man. The night to end all nights. I had all the moves down.
Really?
It was the most passionate love scene you'll ever see. Need I say more?
Yeah.
All right, well, it was about 11 o'clock, and there I was.
And now The Late Show. Burt Lancaster and Deborah Carr starring in From Here to Eternity. Stay tuned for the most passionate love scene you'll ever see.
Oh, wow.
In the late afternoon glow of Los Angeles, when the sun seemed to hesitate before sinking behind palm-lined boulevards, the world of what's happening now unfolded not as a nostalgic echo of youth, but as a restless continuation of lives that had refused to settle into neat conclusions, and it was in this hesitant light that Dwayne, Rerun, and Raj first converged again in a way that felt less like reunion and more like collision, each carrying the weight of years lived loudly, quietly, or recklessly, each pretending not to notice how time had rewritten their reflections. Dwayne arrived first, punctual as ever, a habit hardened by responsibility and a career that demanded reliability, his posture disciplined yet betraying a certain stiffness, as though adulthood had wrapped invisible braces around his shoulders, while his eyes still carried that familiar spark of curiosity, now tempered by caution. Rerun followed with an entrance that could never be described as subtle, his laughter preceding him, rolling through the air like an old catchphrase refusing retirement, his body broader, heavier, but still animated by a joy that felt stubbornly defiant, and his clothes, too loud, too confident, suggested a man who had learned to weaponize humor against disappointment. Raj came last, unhurried, observing before stepping fully into the scene, his smile measured, almost ironic, as if he alone were aware that this moment would define something yet unnamed, and the three of them stood for a beat, suspended between who they had been and who they pretended to be now, until Rerun broke the silence with a joke that landed awkwardly, not because it wasn't funny, but because it reminded them all of a time when laughter had been easier and consequences lighter. They decided, without much discussion, to walk, letting the city carry their conversation. And as they moved through streets buzzing with ambition and exhaustion, their talk drifted from safe subjects, traffic, hold, acquaintances, the absurdity of modern slang, toward deeper undercurrents they each felt but avoided, and it was Raj who first steered them there, mentioning casually how strange it felt to be single again in a city that seemed obsessed with pairing off, his words floating lightly but weighted with implication, prompting Dwayne to clear his throat and offer a vague comment about focusing on work, while Rerun responded with a story about a date gone spectacularly wrong, exaggerating details until it became comedy, yet beneath the laughter lingered the unmistakable scent of loneliness. They ended up at a small bar, dimly lit, the kind of place that welcomed stories more than patrons, and as they claimed a corner booth, the bartender nodded at them with the recognition reserved for men who looked like they had lived enough to deserve a drink without explanation, and it was here that the theme of the night emerged. Not announced but discovered through glances, pauses, and the unspoken question of what intimacy meant to men who had grown older without entirely growing up. Rerun, emboldened by his first drink, launched into a monologue about how making out used to be an event, a ceremony charged with anticipation, how it wasn't just about physical closeness but about possibility, about believing that a kiss could rewrite the future. And his voice softened unexpectedly as he admitted that somewhere along the line, it had started to feel transactional, rushed, as though romance had been reduced to a checklist, and Dwayne listened intently, nodding, surprised by the honesty, while Raj leaned back, arms crossed, considering how much of this applied to him. The conversation spiraled into memories, their teenage bravado dissected with adult skepticism, stories once told with pride now re-examined with a mixture of humor and regret, and as the drinks multiplied, so did the confessions. Each man peeling back layers he hadn't realized he'd been carrying, until the bar itself seemed to fade, leaving only the raw intimacy of shared vulnerability. It was Dwayne who confessed. Next, admitting that stability, once his goal, had become a cage of sorts, that in striving to be dependable, he had forgotten how to be spontaneous, how to risk looking foolish for the sake of connection, and his words hung heavy in the air, challenging the others to respond not with jokes but with truth. Raj surprised them both by acknowledging his own fear, not of being alone, but of being known, of allowing someone to see beyond his charm to the uncertainty beneath, and in that moment, the three friends recognized a shared longing that transcended age, a desire not just for physical closeness but for recognition, for someone to look at them and see value unmeasured by success or youth. The night stretched on, punctuated by laughter that felt different now, less performative, more healing, and as they eventually stumbled back into the street, the city greeted them with neon reflections and distant sirens. A reminder that life continued regardless of personal revelations, and it was then that the unexpected happened, when Rerun, spotting a couple across the street locked in an exaggerated display of affection, commented half-jokingly, half-bitterly about how simple it looked, how effortless, prompting Dwayne to challenge the notion, suggesting that maybe simplicity was an illusion maintained by effort unseen, and Raj, watching the couple separate and walk off in opposite directions, mused that making out was often the easy part, while staying connected was the real test. Their walk took them toward Rerun's apartment, a modest place filled with relics of past ambitions and present compromises, and inside, the atmosphere shifted again, becoming quieter, more introspective, as though the walls themselves demanded honesty, and they settled into worn furniture, the comfort of familiarity allowing silence to settle without discomfort. Rerun disappeared briefly into the kitchen, returning with another round, and as they drank, the conversation turned toward the future, tentative plans and vague hopes voiced cautiously, each man wary of sounding foolish yet yearning to articulate something more than survival, and it was here that the idea of change took root, not as a dramatic vow but as a subtle agreement to approach life differently, to risk vulnerability again, to remember that intimacy began not with grand gestures but with openness. The evening ended not with resolution but with possibility, Dwayne standing by the door, hesitating before leaving. Raj offering a rare, unguarded smile, and Rerun watching them go, feeling both exposed and strangely lighter, and as the door closed, each man carried with him the quiet realization that making out, in all its meanings, was less about youth lost and more about courage rediscovered, a lesson only time could teach, and the city outside hummed, indifferent yet accommodating, ready to witness whatever choices they would make next. Morning arrived without ceremony, sliding into the city like an uninvited guest who nevertheless knew exactly where everything was kept, and for Dwayne, Rerun, and Raj, it arrived carrying the faint aftertaste of confession, the kind that lingered not on the tongue but in the mind, reshaping thoughts before they were fully awake. Dwayne woke first, as he often did, the habit of discipline pulling him from sleep even on a day that promised no meetings, no deadlines, only reflection, and as he lay there staring at the ceiling, he replayed fragments of the previous night, Rerun's unexpected sincerity, Raj's quiet admissions, his own words sounding strange now that they echoed back at him without the buffer of alcohol, and he wondered when exactly he had decided that predictability was synonymous with safety. Whether that choice had been made consciously or simply inherited from a lifetime of being the responsible one, across town, reruns stirred later, sunlight pushing through blinds. He never quite bothered to fix, illuminating a living room cluttered with objects that told conflicting stories of who he had been and who he still pretended to be, and as he sat up, rubbing his face, the humor that usually came so easily to him felt delayed, replaced by a heaviness he wasn't used to acknowledging in the daylight, because laughter had always been his preferred language, his shield, and now, stripped of it, he confronted a question that felt dangerous in its simplicity: what if? The jokes weren't enough anymore. Raj, meanwhile, greeted the morning with a familiar mix of calm and calculation, brewing coffee with deliberate care, as though ritual could restore balance. And yet even as he went through the motions, his thoughts drifted to the vulnerability he had allowed himself the night before, the admission that he feared being known, and he recognized that fear now as both obstacle and invitation, a gate that could remain closed or be pushed open at considerable risk. They did not plan to meet again so soon, and yet by late morning, a text thread had formed, casual in tone but urgent in subtext, and within an hour they found themselves at a quiet diner that seemed suspended in time, vinyl booths and laminated menus offering comfort without expectation, and as they slid into their seats, there was an awkwardness they hadn't anticipated. Not the discomfort of estrangement but the uncertainty that followed honesty, the unspoken question of whether last night had changed anything or whether it would be politely ignored. Rerun broke the tension first, not with a joke this time but with an observation about how strange it felt to see them all sober, and the comment drew a soft laugh from Dwayne and a knowing nod from Raj, easing the moment just enough to allow conversation to flow. They talked about trivialities at first, the food, the weather, a television show none of them particularly liked, circling the real subject like cautious swimmers testing cold water, until Dwayne, stirring his coffee longer than necessary, admitted that he had been thinking about what Rerun said regarding intimacy feeling transactional, and the word hung there, heavy and accurate, prompting Raj to add that perhaps it wasn't intimacy itself that had changed but the expectations surrounding it, the pressure to define outcomes before experiences had even begun. Rerun listened, chewing thoughtfully, then confessed that for him, making out had once represented hope. A pause in time where anything felt possible, whereas now it often felt like a prelude to disappointment or misunderstanding, and his voice cracked just enough to signal that the humor would not be making an appearance. The conversation deepened, each man offering pieces of his history not as anecdotes but as evidence, Dwayne speaking of relationships structured like schedules, efficient but emotionally sparse. Raj recalling connections that never quite moved beyond surface charm, and Rerun describing a series of near misses, moments when vulnerability had hovered just out of reach before being chased away by a punchline. As plates were cleared and coffee refilled, they began to see patterns emerging, not just individually but collectively, realizing that their shared past had trained them to perform roles, leader, comic relief, smooth observer, that no longer served them in the same way, and the recognition was both liberating and unsettling, because letting go of roles meant stepping into uncertainty. After the diner, they walked again, the city now fully awake, pedestrians moving with purpose, and as they passed a park where younger couples lounged with an ease that felt foreign, Rerun remarked on how effortless it all looked from the outside, a comment that sparked a discussion about perception versus reality, about how making out, like happiness, was often curated for public consumption, while the real work happened privately, in moments unseen. Raj suggested that perhaps they had spent too much time comparing their internal struggles to external images, and Dwayne agreed, acknowledging that he had often measured success in visible milestones rather than emotional fulfillment, and the honesty between them began to feel less like confession and more like collaboration, as though they were jointly drafting a new understanding of themselves. The walk led them to a small community center hosting a weekend art fair, and without much thought, they wandered in, surrounded by paintings, sculptures, and handmade crafts that reflected a spectrum of expression, and something about the vulnerability embedded in the art resonated with their earlier conversation, prompting Rerun to comment that these strangers had found ways to externalize feelings he struggled to articulate, and Raj mused that creation was another form of intimacy, a dialogue between inner and outer worlds. Dwayne found himself lingering over a photograph depicting an older couple holding hands, their faces lined but content, and the image stirred something deep, a longing. Not for youth but for continuity, for a connection that evolved rather than expired. As they moved through the fair, they encountered people engaged in genuine interaction, artists explaining their work, visitors listening with interest, and the simplicity of these exchanges contrasted sharply with the complexity they often associated with dating and romance, leading Raj to observe that perhaps they had been overcomplicating things, confusing vulnerability with weakness, and Rerun laughed softly, admitting that simplicity had always scared him because it left no room to hide. The afternoon unfolded organically, conversation ebbing and flowing, moments of silence settling comfortably between them, and it became clear that what they were experiencing was a form of intimacy in itself, a platonic closeness that challenged their assumptions about connection. And this realization did not diminish their desire for romantic relationships but reframed it, suggesting that intimacy was not a destination but a practice, cultivated through presence and honesty. As evening approached, they parted ways again, each returning to his own space with new questions and tentative resolve, and for Rerun, alone in his apartment once more, the quiet felt different now, less oppressive, and he resisted the urge to distract himself with television or noise, choosing instead to sit with his thoughts, acknowledging both fear and hope without immediately converting either into comedy. Dwayne spent the evening reorganizing his apartment, a physical manifestation of an internal shift, discarding items that no longer served him, creating space without yet knowing what would fill it, while Raj called an old acquaintance, not with romantic intent but with genuine curiosity, testing his ability to engage without performance. The night closed gently, without dramatic declarations or sudden transformations. But beneath the surface, something had undeniably shifted, a collective understanding that making out, in its truest sense, was less about fleeting contact and more about sustained openness, and as each man prepared for sleep, the city outside continued its endless motion, unaware that within 3 ordinary lives, a quiet recalibration was underway, setting the stage for choices yet to be made and risks yet to be taken. The following days unfolded with a deceptive calm, the kind that made each of them wonder whether the subtle shifts they felt were real or merely the lingering illusion of a meaningful conversation stretched over too many hours. And yet for Dwayne, Rerun, and Raj, routine itself began to feel slightly misaligned, as though familiar patterns no longer fit as comfortably as they once had. Dwayne noticed it first at work, where meetings blurred together in their usual rhythm, but his attention drifted more than usual, his mind replaying phrases from the diner, the art fair, the realization that stability without warmth was simply another form of emptiness, and when a colleague invited him for an after-work drink, his instinctive refusal caught in his throat before emerging as an unexpected yes, surprising both of them. Rerun experienced his own disruption at the gym, a place he frequented more for social observation than physical progress, where he caught himself watching people not With his usual comedic commentary but with curiosity, noticing the small gestures between couples, the way hands brushed, the ease or tension in their body language, and for the first time, instead of mocking or envying it, he felt an urge to understand it. Raj's shift was quieter still, manifesting in his conversations, where he began asking follow-up questions instead of steering dialogue back toward himself. Listening not as a tactic but as an experiment, and he found the results unsettling. In their intimacy, discovering that people revealed more when they sensed genuine interest, and that such revelations demanded a response more vulnerable than charm, their text thread remained active, a casual lifeline of observations, jokes, and occasional moments of sincerity, and it was through this thread that Rerun floated the idea of a double date, quickly amending it to a triple, half joking, half testing the waters. And though the suggestion was met with initial hesitation, it lingered. Just long enough to become inevitable, the plan took shape around a friend of a friend, a low-pressure setup designed to minimize expectation, and yet beneath the surface, each man felt the weight of anticipation, the awareness that this was not just a social outing but a practical application of everything they had been dissecting. The night arrived warm and clear, the city glowing with possibility. And they met outside a modest restaurant that prided itself on atmosphere rather than exclusivity, and as they waited, Dwayne adjusted his jacket more than necessary, Rerun cracked a joke that landed with less confidence than usual, and Raj observed both of them with a mixture of empathy and self-awareness, recognizing his own nervousness mirrored in their gestures. The women arrived together, laughter preceding them much as Rerun's had days earlier. And introductions were made with polite smiles and measured enthusiasm, names exchanged and immediately repeated to anchor them in memory, and as they settled around the table, the initial conversation followed familiar, safe routes, work, hobbies, light humor, the practiced dance of first impressions. Dwayne found himself resisting the urge to present a curated version of himself, instead answering questions honestly, even when honesty felt less impressive, admitting uncertainty about where his career was heading. Surprising himself with the relief that followed, Rerun struggled most visibly, his instinct to perform flaring whenever silence threatened, yet he caught himself, letting pauses breathe, discovering that not every moment needed to be filled with laughter, and when he spoke about his love for music and the memories attached to certain songs, his voice softened, drawing genuine interest rather than polite amusement. Raj navigated the evening with deliberate care, conscious of his tendency to charm as a defense, choosing instead to reveal small truths, like his fear of superficial connection. Phrasing it lightly but sincerely, and the response he received, nods of recognition rather than discomfort, encouraged him to continue. As appetizers arrived and drinks were refreshed, the atmosphere shifted, moving from polite engagement toward something warmer, more spontaneous, and it was in these moments that the concept of making out surfaced organically, not as an explicit topic but as an undercurrent, evident in lingering eye contact, in the way bodies leaned subtly closer, in the shared laughter that carried an unspoken question of possibility. Dwayne noticed it when his date brushed his hand while reaching for her glass, and neither of them pulled away immediately, the contact brief yet charged, reminding him of Rerun's words about anticipation, about the ceremony of closeness, and he felt a flutter he hadn't experienced in years, not purely physical but emotional, a sense of being present rather than projecting forward. Rerun experienced his own moment when his date teased him gently about his reputation for humor, asking what he was like when he wasn't joking, and instead of deflecting, He answered honestly, admitting he wasn't entirely sure, and the vulnerability of that admission created a quiet intimacy more powerful than any punchline. Raj's connection unfolded through conversation, a gradual deepening marked by shared reflections on relationships, expectations, and the fear of misalignment. And when his date spoke about wanting to be seen beyond roles and labels, he felt a resonance that bypassed attraction and settled somewhere deeper, a recognition that startled him in its clarity. The evening progressed without dramatic gestures, no grand declarations or overt advances, yet by the time dessert arrived, the energy around the table had transformed, infused with a sense of mutual respect and curiosity, and as they paid the bill and stepped back into the night, the question of what came next hovered gently, unspoken but acknowledged. They decided to walk, the group moving together down softly lit streets, conversation splintering into pairs and rejoining fluidly. And it was during this walk that the first kiss nearly happened, not dramatically, but almost accidentally, when Dwayne and his date paused slightly behind the others, sharing a quiet moment that felt both tentative and charged. And though they didn't cross that threshold, the possibility itself felt meaningful, a reminder that intimacy did not require immediacy. Rerun, walking alongside his date, felt a similar tension, an awareness of proximity, of laughter that edged closer to silence, and he realized that for once, he wasn't in a rush to define the moment, content to let it exist as it was, a subtle victory over his own impatience. Raj found himself lingering at the back with his date, their conversation drifting toward personal history, and when they reached the end of the block, he surprised himself by expressing a desire to continue talking another time. Not framed as obligation but as genuine interest, and the simplicity of the exchange felt revolutionary. Eventually, they reached a natural stopping point, goodbyes exchanged with warmth rather than formality, numbers shared without the usual subtext of expectation, and as the women departed, the three friends stood together for a moment, absorbing the experience. Rerun broke the silence with a subdued remark about how different it all felt, how unforced, and Dwayne agreed, noting that the absence of pressure had made the evening more enjoyable than many past encounters structured around outcome. Raj, thoughtful as ever, suggested that perhaps they were learning to approach intimacy as a dialogue rather than a performance, and the observation resonated deeply. They parted ways that night with lighter steps, each carrying not certainty but a sense of alignment, a feeling that they were finally moving in sync with their own values rather than outdated scripts. And as they returned to their respective homes, the city once again played its indifferent role, lights flickering, traffic humming, unaware that three men were quietly redefining what making out meant to them, not as a goal to be achieved but as a process to be honored, setting the tone for encounters yet to unfold. In the days that followed the dinner, the memory of that evening settled into each of them differently, like the same song heard through three separate speakers, familiar yet altered by tone and distance, and while none of them spoke of it explicitly at first, the experience threaded itself through their routines, subtly influencing decisions that might once have been automatic. Dwayne found himself replaying the near kiss in quiet moments, not with regret or frustration but with a surprising sense of satisfaction, as though restraint itself had been an act of confidence. And at work he noticed a shift in how he carried himself, less rigid, more open to improvisation, responding to conversations without immediately steering them toward resolution, a change his colleagues sensed even if they couldn't name it. Rerun, on the other hand, oscillated between optimism and self-doubt, moments of pride in his newfound restraint punctuated by the familiar itch to overanalyze, and as he paced His apartment, phone in hand, debating whether to text first, he recognized the internal tug-of-war between his old instinct to chase validation and his emerging desire to let connection develop organically. Raj approached the aftermath with characteristic introspection, cataloging details of the conversation he'd shared, not to script future interactions but to understand why it had felt different. And he concluded that the absence of performance had allowed something more authentic to surface. A realization both liberating and terrifying, because authenticity removed his usual safety net. Their group chat became a space for cautious celebration, messages acknowledging that the night had been unexpectedly enjoyable, emojis standing in for emotions they weren't quite ready to articulate fully, and it was Riran who suggested they debrief in person, half serious, half humorous, proposing a casual meet-up that required no agenda beyond presence. They reconvened at Dwayne's apartment, a neutral ground marked by cleanliness and order, and as they settled in with takeout and low music, the atmosphere felt both familiar and charged, as though they were continuing a conversation paused rather than starting a new one. It was Raj who first articulated what the others had been circling, noting that none of them had rushed toward physical intimacy, and yet all of them had felt closer than expected, prompting Riran to admit that he'd always equated progress with escalation, and that slowing down felt counterintuitive but oddly empowering. Dwayne reflected on how the restraint had heightened his awareness, making small gestures feel significant, and he confessed that in previous relationships, he'd often pushed for clarity too soon, mistaking control for commitment, a habit he was now questioning. The discussion flowed easily, unburdened by judgment, and as they shared insights, they recognized that this collective processing was itself an extension of intimacy, a safe space to examine vulnerability without fear of ridicule or dismissal. The evening took an unexpected turn when Riran received a text from his date, a simple message referencing a joke they'd shared, and his instinctive grin drew attention, prompting playful encouragement from the others, and after a brief hesitation, he replied honestly, resisting the urge to embellish or entertain. And the simplicity of the exchange left him both exposed and exhilarated. Raj observed this with interest, noting how directness seemed to invite reciprocity, and later that night, he too reached out, suggesting a low-key meet-up without framing it as a date, an experiment in redefining expectations. Dwayne, slower to act, chose reflection instead, recognizing that his impulse to wait was not avoidance but discernment, a conscious choice to honor the pacing that felt right rather than adhering to external timelines. The following weekend brought a new test of their evolving perspectives when they attended a birthday gathering hosted by a mutual acquaintance, a lively affair filled with music, laughter, and the familiar social choreography of mingling, and as they entered the crowded space together, they felt a subtle solidarity, an unspoken agreement to observe rather than perform. Riran found himself approached by several people who expected his usual antics, and while he indulged briefly, he soon redirected conversations toward more substantive topics, surprising both himself and others. And when one interaction began to edge toward flirtation, he remained present without rushing. Discovering that confidence did not require immediate payoff, Raj navigated the party with quiet ease, engaging deeply in one-on-one conversations rather than circulating for maximum exposure, and he noticed how this approach attracted genuine interest, leading to exchanges that felt grounded rather than transactional. Dwayne, meanwhile, was confronted with his own patterns when he encountered an old flame. Their conversation polite but tinged with unresolved tension, and instead of retreating, into defensiveness or nostalgia, he acknowledged the past with clarity, expressing appreciation without reopening old wounds, and the interaction left him feeling unexpectedly whole, as though he had finally integrated a chapter rather than avoiding it. As the night wore on, the three friends regrouped intermittently, sharing observations through glances and brief comments. And they recognized how differently they were experiencing the same environment compared to previous years, less driven by validation, more attuned to alignment. The concept of making out surfaced again, this time explicitly, during a late-night conversation on the balcony, where Rerun joked about how the phrase now felt almost archaic, prompting Raj to suggest that its essence had always been misunderstood, that it wasn't merely about physical closeness but about mutual curiosity, the willingness to explore without demanding certainty. Dwayne added that perhaps making out was a metaphor for connection itself, a space between strangers and partners where possibility lived, and the idea resonated deeply, reframing their experiences as part of a larger process rather than isolated events. The party eventually dissolved into farewells, and as they stepped into the cooler night air, each man carried with him a sense of groundedness, not because he had achieved something tangible, but because he had acted in accordance with his evolving understanding. In the days that followed, these shifts began to influence their interactions beyond romance, affecting friendships, work relationships, even how they spoke to themselves, and Rerun noticed that his humor felt lighter now, less defensive, while Raj found himself more comfortable expressing uncertainty, and Dwayne allowed flexibility into areas he had once guarded tightly. The women they had met re-entered their lives in varied ways, casual messages, invitations without pressure, conversations that unfolded at their own pace, and instead of interpreting ambiguity as rejection, they embraced it as space for mutual choice. One evening, Rerun found himself sitting across from his date again, this time in a quiet coffee shop, their conversation flowing effortlessly, and when a moment of silence settled between them, he resisted the urge to fill it, letting the tension breathe. And when their lips eventually met, the kiss was unhurried, grounded in presence rather than expectation, a physical expression of the emotional groundwork laid. Beforehand, Raj experienced his own version of intimacy through a long walk and conversation that ended not with a kiss but with a shared understanding, and he realized that fulfillment did not require uniform outcomes, that connection could manifest in multiple forms without hierarchy. Dwayne, true to his pacing, found himself drawn toward a deeper exploration of self before pursuing another relationship. And he felt no urgency to justify this choice, recognizing that honoring his internal rhythm was itself an act of intimacy. As these experiences accumulated, the three friends continued to meet, their conversations evolving alongside them, no longer fixated solely on romance but encompassing broader questions of purpose, aging, and authenticity, and through it all, the theme of making out remained, transformed from a youthful preoccupation into a mature philosophy, an approach to life that valued presence over performance, curiosity over control. The city, ever indifferent, provided endless backdrops for these quiet transformations, and within its sprawl, Dwayne, Rerun, and Raj moved forward not with certainty but with intention, aware that the journey they were on did not promise tidy conclusions but offered something far more sustaining, a renewed capacity for connection grounded in honesty, patience, and the courage to remain open even when outcomes were unknown. If the earlier weeks had been about recalibration, about noticing subtle internal shifts and testing them gently against the world, then this new phase arrived with a quieter but more demanding challenge, because awareness, once gained, refused to retreat, and for Dwayne, Rerun, and Raj, living consciously began to feel less like an experiment and more like a responsibility. Dwayne sensed it on a Tuesday morning, standing in line for coffee before work, when he caught himself observing not the efficiency of the service, but the expressions of the people around him, the impatience, the distracted scrolling, the brief flashes of connection between strangers, and he realized that he had spent years moving through life as though everything were a problem to be solved rather than an experience to be inhabited. A realization that unsettled him enough to make him pause before responding automatically to an email that demanded an immediate decision, choosing instead to request time, a small act of resistance against his own conditioning. Rerun's reckoning came less quietly, crashing into him during a casual stand-up comedy open mic he had agreed to attend, a space where he had always felt most at home, and as he watched performer after performer mine vulnerability for laughs, he felt an unexpected discomfort, not with the honesty but with the armor layered over it. Recognizing in their routines echoes of his own long-practiced defenses, and when his turn came, he found himself abandoning his prepared jokes midway, speaking instead about fear, about aging, about the strange bravery required to stop hiding behind punchlines, and the room responded not with roaring laughter but with attentive silence and then a warm, sustained applause that left him shaken, aware that he had crossed an invisible line he could not uncross. Raj's challenge manifested internally, a slow-burning unease that surfaced during moments of stillness, when he realized that listening deeply to others now demanded that he also listen to himself, and he began journaling, not as a productivity exercise but as a form of dialogue, confronting patterns of avoidance he had once rationalized as independence. And as he wrote, he recognized how often he had equated emotional self-sufficiency with safety, a realization that reframed many past relationships not as failures but as incomplete attempts shaped by fear. Their conversations grew richer, less focused on recounting events and more on interrogating meaning, and during one long evening walk, Rerun posed a question that lingered long after it was spoken, asking whether intimacy was something you found or something you practiced, and while none of them answered immediately, the silence that followed felt productive, a shared space of contemplation rather than discomfort. Dwayne eventually suggested that intimacy might be a skill neglected through disuse, requiring intention and humility, an idea that resonated with Raj, who added that like any skill, it could not be mastered alone, and Rerun, ever translating insight into metaphor, compared it to dancing, where timing, awareness, and responsiveness mattered more than flawless execution. These discussions began to influence how they navigated their romantic connections, and Rerun, now seeing the woman he'd kissed with a cautious but growing affection, found himself resisting the urge to accelerate toward labels or outcomes, choosing instead to articulate his intentions openly, explaining that he wanted to explore connection without rushing past the present moment, and her response, thoughtful rather than dismissive, reassured him that honesty could invite collaboration rather than rejection. Raj, whose connection had evolved into a series of long conversations and shared activities, confronted his own impulse to keep things undefined indefinitely, realizing that ambiguity, once a refuge, could also become a form of distance, and during a quiet dinner, he expressed his desire to be more intentional, acknowledging both interest and uncertainty, and the exchange that followed, grounded and mutual, marked a turning point where vulnerability felt less like exposure and more like alignment. Dwayne's path diverged slightly, as he found himself drawn not toward a specific person but toward an expanded sense of self, enrolling in a weekend workshop focused on creative writing, an interest he had long suppressed in favor of practicality, and within that space, he encountered others navigating similar questions of expression and connection, discovering that intimacy could exist in shared creativity, in the courage to reveal inner landscapes through words rather than gestures. The three friends observed these divergences without judgment, recognizing that growth did not require uniformity, and their support for one another deepened, moving beyond camaraderie into something more akin to chosen family. A bond reinforced not by nostalgia alone but by active participation in one another's evolving lives, the theme of making out resurfaced repeatedly. Sometimes humorously, sometimes philosophically, and during one late-night conversation, Raj suggested that the phrase now felt symbolic of a transitional space, a threshold where curiosity outweighed certainty, where presence mattered more than outcome, and Rerun agreed, noting that his most meaningful recent moments had occurred not during the kiss itself but in the pauses before and after, the spaces where intention and attention met. Dwayne reflected that perhaps the cultural obsession with defining relationships had obscured the value of these in-between spaces, and the idea resonated, offering a framework that validated their current experiences without forcing premature conclusions. As weeks passed, the city provided a steady rhythm against which their transformations played out. Familiar streets now layered with new associations, cafes where conversations had shifted, parks where reflections had deepened. And each man noticed how his internal changes subtly altered his perception of the external world, colors seeming richer, interactions more textured, moments more fully inhabited. Rerun encountered a setback when a misunderstanding with his partner triggered old insecurities, and his instinct to deflect with humor flared. But this time he caught himself, choosing instead to articulate his fear of being misinterpreted, and though the conversation was uncomfortable, its resolution reinforced his belief that conflict, when navigated with openness, could deepen rather than diminish connection. Raj faced his own challenge when he realized that his growing intimacy required boundaries, learning to balance openness with self-respect, a nuance he had previously overlooked, and through trial and reflection, he discovered that saying no, when aligned with authenticity, could coexist with connection rather than threaten it. Dwayne, meanwhile, experienced an unexpected attraction within his creative circle, and instead of immediately analyzing its viability, he allowed himself to feel it without obligation, observing how desire could exist without demanding immediate action, a lesson that felt both novel and freeing. Their shared reflections began to influence others around them, subtle ripples spreading through conversations with friends and colleagues, as they modeled a different way of engaging, one less driven by performance and more grounded in presence. And while none of them claimed certainty or mastery, they recognized that their willingness to question old scripts had already shifted the narrative of their lives. One evening, gathered once more in Rerun's apartment, they revisited the beginning of this journey, recalling that first night of unexpected honesty, and they marveled at how far they had traveled without dramatic upheaval, how transformation had emerged through accumulation rather than rupture. And as they sat in comfortable silence, the city's hum filtering through open windows, they felt a quiet gratitude for the courage it had taken simply to stay present. Making out, once a symbol of youthful urgency and external validation, had become something richer and more nuanced, a metaphor for engagement with life itself, an invitation to approach each interaction with curiosity, respect, and attentiveness. And as Dwayne, Rerun, and Raj looked ahead, they did so without rigid expectations, aware that uncertainty remained but confident that they now possessed the tools to navigate it, grounded in a shared understanding that intimacy was not a destination to be reached but a practice to be sustained, moment by moment, choice by choice, in a world that continued to move relentlessly forward. By the time summer leaned fully into the city, stretching days longer and nights warmer, the lives of Dwayne, Rerun, and Raj had entered a phase where intention no longer felt novel but necessary, a quiet discipline that demanded attention even when no one was watching. And it was in this season that their evolving understanding of intimacy was tested not by romance alone but by fatigue, distraction, and the seductive pull of old habits that promised ease over depth. Dwayne felt this tension Acutely as responsibilities at work intensified, deadlines stacking like invisible weights, and the familiar urge to retreat into efficiency resurfaced, tempting him to reduce conversations to outcomes and interactions to transactions, yet each time he caught himself slipping, he remembered the sensation of being truly present, the way slowing down had opened unexpected doors. And he began practicing micropauses throughout his day, moments where he consciously checked not just what needed to be done but how he was engaging with the people around him, a practice that subtly altered his relationships, making colleagues feel heard rather than managed. Rerun's challenge arrived in the form of attention, as his recent vulnerability at the open mic had garnered invitations and praise, the kind of external validation he had always craved. And while part of him thrilled at the recognition, another part sensed danger, recognizing how easily authenticity could become another performance if measured by applause, and he found himself questioning motives before each appearance, asking whether he was speaking to connect or to impress, a distinction that required honesty he wasn't always comfortable with. Raj's test was quieter but no less demanding, manifesting in the slow deepening of his connection, where emotional closeness now brought with it expectations, shared plans, and the need to negotiate differences. And he realized that openness without structure could lead to confusion. That intimacy also required clarity, and so he began initiating conversations about needs and boundaries, discovering that naming them did not diminish spontaneity but provided a framework within which trust could grow. Their group meetings continued, though less frequent, each gathering carrying the sense of a checkpoint rather than a ritual, and during one such evening at a rooftop overlooking the city, the conversation turned toward the cost of presence, Rerun admitting that staying open was exhausting in ways he hadn't anticipated, that humor had once offered relief through distance, while honesty required endurance, and Dwayne nodded, acknowledging that engagement demanded energy but arguing that disengagement extracted a quieter, longer-lasting toll. Raj framed it differently, suggesting that the fatigue they felt was part of recalibration, muscles strengthening through use, and the metaphor resonated, reframing their exhaustion as evidence of growth rather than warning. The city below them pulsed with life, lights blinking like signals, and as they watched strangers move through their own narratives, the three friends felt a renewed appreciation for the complexity of connection, recognizing that everyone below was navigating similar tensions between desire and fear, presence and escape. Rerun's romantic relationship entered a more uncertain phase during this time, as initial warmth gave way to differing rhythms, and he found himself confronting the possibility that alignment did not guarantee longevity, a realization that stirred old insecurities. Yet instead of defaulting to self-blame or avoidance, he chose dialogue, articulating his needs while remaining receptive to hers, and though the outcome remained unclear, the process itself felt like a victory, proof that he could remain open even when certainty was unavailable. Dwayne experienced a shift of a different kind when his creative writing workshop culminated in a reading, an intimate event, where participants shared pieces born of vulnerability, and as he read his own work aloud, voice steady but heart racing, he felt a form of intimacy distinct from romance yet equally potent, the exposure of inner landscapes to attentive listeners, and afterward, conversations sparked that transcended small talk, reminding him that connection could emerge wherever authenticity was invited. Raj's evolving partnership reached a crossroads when plans for a shared trip prompted a deeper discussion about expectations and pacing, and he found himself articulating fears he might once have masked with charm, and the conversation, though challenging, resulted in a mutual understanding that strengthened rather than strained their bond, reinforcing his belief that clarity was an ally of intimacy, not its enemy. These individual experiences fed back into their collective narrative, each man bringing insights to the next gathering, and during one late-night conversation, they revisited the concept of making out, laughing at how distant its original meaning now felt, yet recognizing that its essence, the meeting of curiosity and courage, remained central to their journey. Rerun suggested that making out was no longer about chemistry alone but about consent at every level, emotional, temporal, and experiential, an ongoing negotiation rather than a single moment, and Dwayne expanded on the idea, proposing that consent with oneself was equally crucial. The willingness to acknowledge when one was ready or not, interested or hesitant, without judgment. Raj added that this internal consent created space for genuine choice, preventing intimacy from becoming an obligation or performance, and the synthesis of these perspectives felt like a milestone, a shared philosophy forged through lived experience rather than theory. Summer nights continued to offer opportunities for reflection and testing, and one such night, after a spontaneous gathering with friends, Rerun found himself alone on a quiet street, the hum of laughter fading behind him, and he realized that while he enjoyed companionship, he no longer feared solitude, that being alone no longer equated to being unseen, a shift that filled him with a calm he had never known. Dwayne, walking home from a late workshop session, felt a similar peace, aware that his life no longer needed to be justified through constant productivity or relational status, that his worth was not contingent on momentum. Raj experienced this calm during a shared silence with his partner, a moment without conversation or agenda, where presence itself felt sufficient, and he recognized it as a form of intimacy he might once have overlooked, mistaking quiet for distance. Challenges still arose, moments of miscommunication, fatigue, and doubt, but the difference lay in their response, each man now equipped with a language for his experience, a capacity to pause, reflect, and engage rather than react. Their friendship deepened accordingly, evolving from shared history into shared practice, a living laboratory where ideas were tested and refined, and during one reflective evening, they acknowledged that this journey had subtly altered their understanding of masculinity, challenging scripts that equated strength with detachment and vulnerability with weakness, and in embracing a broader definition, they felt more integrated, less fragmented. The city, in its relentless rhythm, provided endless reminders of impermanence, seasons shifting, crowds changing, yet within that flux, Dwayne, Rerun, and Raj had found something stable, not in certainty but in process, a commitment to remain engaged with themselves and others even when discomfort arose. As summer edged toward its peak, bringing with it both abundance and intensity, they sensed that another transition loomed, one that would test their principles under different pressures, and while none of them could predict what shape it would take, they felt prepared in a way they hadn't before, grounded not in outcomes but in alignment. Making out, once a shorthand for youthful experimentation, had become a living metaphor for their approach to life, an invitation to meet each moment with curiosity, respect, and courage, to lean in without losing oneself. And as they stood together one evening watching fireworks bloom briefly against the night sky, they felt a shared gratitude for the path they were on, aware that while the journey remained unfinished, the way they were traveling had already transformed them. As summer began its gradual retreat, leaving behind evenings that cooled just enough to invite reflection, Dwayne, Rerun, and Raj entered a stretch of their journey where momentum slowed and nuance took center stage, a period less dramatic than earlier shifts yet more revealing, because it demanded consistency rather than insight, patience rather than revelation. And it was within this quieter terrain that the true durability of their evolving perspectives was tested. Dwayne felt the change most acutely in the absence of novelty, when the initial excitement of creative exploration settled into routine, and he discovered that sustaining openness required a different kind of courage than initiating it, a willingness to show up even when inspiration waned, and so he committed to his writing practice with the same discipline he once reserved for work. Finding that intimacy with oneself was not a spontaneous event but a cultivated relationship built through repeated acts of attention. Rerun, whose life had long thrived on peaks of energy and reaction, struggled with this plateau, the lack of clear markers making him restless, and he noticed how easily he gravitated toward distractions that promised quick stimulation, social media, late-night outings, familiar flirtations, yet each time he indulged, the emptiness returned faster, sharper, prompting him to confront an uncomfortable truth that growth, unlike performance, did not always offer immediate reward. Raj navigated this phase with cautious curiosity, observing how his deeper connection now intersected with everyday logistics, schedules, moods, unspoken expectations, and he realized that intimacy, once idealized as emotional depth, also involved negotiation of the mundane, a reality that neither diminished its value nor romanticized it, but grounded it, and through this grounding, he found a steadiness that surprised him. Their conversations reflected this shift, less animated by discovery and more focused on integration, and during one evening at a quiet cafe, they spoke about boredom, not as a failure but as a signal, Rerun admitting that he feared it because it stripped away his usual defenses, leaving him face to face with himself, and Dwayne suggesting that boredom might simply be the space where deeper questions surfaced once superficial ones had been exhausted. Raj added that learning to sit with that space without rushing to fill it was itself a form of intimacy, an idea that resonated with the others, reframing stillness as engagement rather than avoidance. The topic of making out surfaced again, this time in the context of expectation, and Rerun observed that the anticipation he once associated with physical closeness now appeared in subtler forms, the anticipation of a meaningful conversation, of shared silence, of mutual understanding. And Dwayne noted that these moments required as much vulnerability as any romantic gesture, perhaps more, because they lacked the script and validation of tradition. Raj reflected that this reframing had altered how he approached conflict, seeing disagreements not as threats to intimacy but as invitations to practice it more deliberately, an insight that had begun to transform his responses in real time. Life outside their reflective bubble continued to assert itself, and each man encountered situations that challenged his evolving stance. Dwayne facing pressure at work to prioritize efficiency over empathy, and while he still met deadlines and delivered results, he began advocating for processes that honored people as much as outcomes, a subtle shift that met resistance but also sparked unexpected alliances. Rerun encountered skepticism from friends accustomed to his old persona, jokes about him going soft or serious, and though he laughed them off initially, the comments lingered, forcing him to reckon with the discomfort of outgrowing familiar roles, and after a particularly pointed remark, he chose to respond honestly, explaining that he was exploring a different way of being, and while not everyone understood, the relief he felt affirmed the choice. Raj faced a quieter challenge when his partner expressed concern about the pace of their relationship, and instead of retreating into analysis or reassurance, he engaged directly, acknowledging the concern without defensiveness, and together they examined expectations, discovering misalignments that, once named, lost their power to destabilize. Reinforcing his belief that clarity was not the enemy of romance but its scaffolding, their friendship deepened further. Through shared accountability, each man gently calling out old patterns when they resurfaced, not with judgment but with recognition, and this mutual witnessing became a cornerstone of their bond, offering a mirror that reflected not who they had been but who they were becoming. One evening, during a casual gathering at Rerun's apartment, the conversation turned unexpectedly toward aging, a topic they had skirted before with humor. And this time, Rerun admitted his fear of becoming irrelevant. of losing the vitality that had defined his identity, and Dwayne responded by sharing his fear of stagnation, of becoming so stable that he ceased to evolve, while Raj spoke of his fear of regret, of realizing too late that he had kept parts of himself hidden, and the honesty of the exchange created a palpable intimacy, reminding them that vulnerability did not diminish strength but expanded it. These admissions reframed making out yet again, transforming it into a metaphor for engagement with time itself, an embrace of the present that neither clung to youth nor feared the future, but met each phase with curiosity and respect. As autumn approached, bringing with it changes in light and pace, each man noticed how his internal shifts were mirrored by the environment, days shortening, colors deepening, the city adopting a quieter rhythm that encouraged introspection, and in this atmosphere, they found themselves more attuned to subtle pleasures, a well-timed conversation, a shared laugh, a moment of understanding that required no elaboration. Rerun's romantic relationship reached a turning point during this time, as differences that had once felt manageable began to surface more persistently, and rather than framing the situation as a failure, he approached it as an inquiry, exploring whether alignment still existed beneath affection, and through honest dialogue, they arrived at a mutual decision to step back, not as a retreat from intimacy but as an act of respect for each other's trajectories, and while the separation carried sadness, it lacked the bitterness of past endings, leaving him with a sense of integrity rather than loss. Dwayne experienced a quieter milestone when he shared a new piece of writing with his friends, a reflection on connection that captured his evolving perspective, and their response, thoughtful and engaged, reinforced his sense that intimacy could be cultivated through shared reflection, that words themselves could be a meeting place. Raj encountered his own test when a moment of complacency threatened to dull his attentiveness, and recognizing it, he initiated a conversation with his partner about sustaining curiosity, about resisting the slide into assumption, and the exchange rekindled a sense of exploration, reminding him that intimacy thrived not on novelty alone but on renewed attention. The three friends began to recognize a pattern in their journey, that growth occurred not in linear progression but in cycles of insight, practice, resistance, and integration, and this understanding brought patience, allowing them to meet setbacks without self-reproach. Making out, once a symbol of immediate gratification, now represented an ongoing choice to engage with complexity, to remain present through ambiguity, to value process over resolution. And this shift influenced not only their romantic lives but their engagement with the world at large. One evening, walking together through a park dusted with fallen leaves, they observed younger couples navigating early-stage excitement, and rather than feeling nostalgic or envious, they felt a quiet appreciation for the universality of longing, recognizing themselves in those gestures while honoring their own place on the continuum. The conversation drifted toward legacy, not in grand terms but in the accumulation of moments, and Rerun remarked that perhaps the most meaningful legacy was not how one was remembered but how one had shown up, an idea that resonated deeply. Reframing success as presence rather than impact, Dwayne added that this presence required courage, the courage to remain open even when outcomes were uncertain, and Raj noted that such courage was contagious, inspiring others simply by example. As they parted that night, each carrying his own reflections, they felt a shared confidence that whatever challenges lay ahead, they possessed not answers but orientation, a compass calibrated toward authenticity and connection. The city continued its endless transformation, seasons shifting, stories unfolding, and within that flux, Dwayne Rerun and Raj moved forward with a steadier gait, aware that intimacy was not a destination they would arrive at and secure, but a practice they would return to again and again, refining it through lived experience. Making out, in its transformed meaning, had become less about the meeting of lips and more about the meeting of selves, an invitation extended daily, moment by moment. And as they looked ahead to the unknown terrain of the coming months, they did so with a sense of readiness rooted not in certainty but in trust in their capacity to remain engaged, curious, and open, whatever form connection might take next. Autumn settled fully into the city with a confidence that felt both grounding and sobering, the kind of seasonal shift that made everything appear sharper, more defined, and for Dwayne, Rerun, and Raj, this clarity extended inward, illuminating areas they had not yet examined closely, because while earlier phases had focused on opening up, this one quietly asked a more difficult question. What do you do once you are open and the world responds in ways you cannot control? Dwayne encountered this question during a lull at work that should have felt like relief but instead stirred unease, as if without constant urgency he was forced to confront the deeper motivations behind his striving, and he realized that much of his identity had been built around usefulness, being the dependable one, the solver, the anchor, and now that he had allowed space for creativity and reflection, he felt an unexpected vulnerability. Wondering who he was when no one needed him urgently, a question that followed him home and lingered as he wrote, shaping his words with a new honesty that felt both unsettling and liberating. Rerun faced a different version of unpredictability after his recent breakup, not dramatic or painful, but clean and mutual, a rarity that left him without the familiar fuel of resentment or regret, and in the quiet that followed, he noticed how much of his past energy had been driven by reaction, by something to push against, and now, without that friction, he felt oddly exposed, unsure how to generate momentum without conflict, prompting him to sit with a stillness he once would have avoided at all costs. Raj's confrontation with uncertainty emerged through deepening commitment, as plans that once felt hypothetical began to solidify, shared holidays discussed, routines merging, and he felt a flicker of resistance not rooted in fear of intimacy but in fear of losing autonomy, a subtle distinction that demanded careful attention, and instead of suppressing it, he chose to explore it openly, initiating conversations that balanced closeness with individuality, discovering that intimacy did not require erasure of self but conscious integration. Their conversations during this period took on a more philosophical tone, less about immediate experiences and more about underlying patterns, and during one evening walk beneath trees shedding their leaves, Rerun posed another deceptively simple question, asking whether vulnerability was a phase or a lifestyle. And Dwayne responded thoughtfully, suggesting that vulnerability might be a stance, something one returned to repeatedly rather than achieved permanently, while Raj added that its form likely evolved with context, requiring different expressions at different stages of life. These discussions highlighted a new layer of their journey, the recognition that growth did not eliminate discomfort but altered one's relationship to it, and this reframing provided a quiet resilience that began to manifest in unexpected ways. Rerun noticed it when he attended another open mic, this time choosing to listen rather than perform, and he found fulfillment not in applause but in witnessing others take risks, feeling connected without being center stage, and the realization surprised him, suggesting that intimacy could exist without visibility. A lesson that softened his long-standing association between being seen and being valued. Dwayne experienced resilience when a creative piece he submitted was met with indifference rather than praise, and instead of spiraling into self-doubt, he allowed himself to feel disappointment without abandoning the practice, recognizing that expression was worthwhile even without affirmation, a subtle but profound shift in how he related to his own vulnerability. Raj felt it when a disagreement with his partner did not resolve neatly, leaving lingering tension. And rather than rushing toward closure, he practiced patience, trusting that connection could withstand incompleteness, and this trust deepened his sense of security more than any immediate resolution could have. The theme of making out resurfaced again, now reframed through the lens of uncertainty, and Rerun joked lightly that maybe making out was less about sparks and more about staying present when the spark dimmed, and the others laughed, recognizing the truth beneath the humor, that intimacy was sustained not by constant intensity but by willingness to remain engaged through quieter phases. Dwayne expanded on the idea, suggesting that just as seasons shifted without asking permission, relationships and inner lives also cycled, and resisting these cycles only created friction, while Raj noted that acceptance did not mean passivity but responsiveness, an active choice to meet each phase with curiosity rather than control. Life continued to present opportunities to test these insights, and during a casual reunion with old friends, Rerun noticed how easily conversations slipped back into familiar patterns of bravado and competition, and while he participated without judgment, he felt a growing dissonance, recognizing that the version of himself being mirrored no longer fully fit, and instead of forcing alignment or withdrawing completely, he allowed the discomfort to exist, trusting that identity could be fluid without being fractured. Dwayne encountered a similar tension when family expectations surfaced during a visit, questions about stability, long-term plans, and milestones delivered with concern rather than criticism, and while he acknowledged their perspective, he articulated his own evolving priorities with calm clarity, discovering that boundaries could be drawn without defensiveness, an act of intimacy that honored both self and other. Raj faced an internal echo of this tension when reflecting on his past independence, moments when he had equated freedom with detachment, and he now saw how this belief had limited his capacity for shared growth. And the insight did not prompt regret but gratitude for timing, understanding that awareness arrived when it was needed. Their friendship remained a steady anchor through these explorations, and during one evening gathered around a simple meal, they spoke about choice, how each day now presented countless small decisions about how to engage, whether to retreat or lean in, whether to default to old scripts or respond freshly, and this awareness transformed even mundane moments into opportunities for practice. Rerun remarked that he now noticed the urge to perform almost as an external signal rather than an internal command, giving him space to decide whether to follow it, and Dwayne shared that he had begun noticing when efficiency was being used to avoid emotional engagement, allowing him to slow down intentionally, while Raj reflected that he had started recognizing when overthinking masked a fear of directness, prompting him to speak sooner rather than later. As the weeks passed, these micro-adjustments accumulated, reshaping their internal landscapes in ways that felt subtle yet undeniable, and while none of them claimed mastery, they recognized a growing trust in their capacity to navigate uncertainty without abandoning themselves. Making out, in its most evolved meaning, now symbolized this trust, the willingness to meet another, or oneself, without guarantees, to engage fully while accepting impermanence. And this understanding infused their lives with a quiet depth that replaced the urgency of earlier stages. One evening, standing together at the edge of a lookout, where the city spread out below them, lights flickering like distant conversations, they reflected on how far they had come, not in terms of achievements but in terms of alignment, and Rerun observed that for the first time, he felt less interested in being memorable and more interested in being real, a sentiment that resonated deeply. Dwayne added that reality, once embraced, felt less heavy than he had feared, And Raj noted that the courage to remain present had begun to feel less like effort and more like habit, a sign that their practice was taking root. As they descended back into the city, autumn air crisp against their skin, they carried with them a sense of quiet confidence, aware that uncertainty would continue to accompany them, but also aware that they no longer needed certainty to engage deeply. Making out, stripped of its youthful urgency and reimagined through lived experience, had become a philosophy of presence, an ongoing invitation to meet life, and each other, with openness, respect, and the courage to remain when retreat would be easier, setting the stage for whatever transitions the coming months would bring. Winter announced itself not with drama but with insistence, shorter days pressing inward, nights arriving early and lingering, and within this compressed light Dwayne, Rerun, and Raj found that the practices they had cultivated were no longer optional reflections but tools required for navigation, because winter had a way of stripping away excess, revealing structures beneath routines. And it was during this season that each of them confronted solitude in its most honest form. Dwayne felt it first in the quiet evenings after work, when writing no longer served as novelty or refuge but as mirror, reflecting back questions he could not outrun, and as he sat at his desk watching darkness pool outside his window, he realized that much of his earlier restlessness had been fueled by fear of stillness, of sitting with himself without distraction, and now, faced with it nightly, he began to experience a different texture of presence, one that was less energizing but more grounding, a companionship with himself that felt unfamiliar yet necessary. Rerun encountered winter through absence, the spaces once occupied by romantic anticipation now unfilled, weekends stretching longer, social invitations thinning, and at first he responded with old strategies, filling the calendar, staying busy, chasing noise, but the effort felt hollow, and one evening, after canceling plans impulsively, he stayed home alone, resisting the urge to numb the quiet, and in that silence he felt a grief he had rarely acknowledged, not for a specific person but for versions of himself that had relied on constant reaction to feel alive, and as the emotion moved through him without being deflected by humor, he sensed a release, a loosening of something long held tight. Raj's winter challenge manifested within closeness rather than solitude, as shared routines with his partner intensified, proximity amplifying not just affection but difference, and he realized that intimacy required a new level of attentiveness when novelty faded, that staying present now meant engaging not just with excitement but with repetition, and this recognition prompted him to initiate conversations about maintaining individuality within togetherness, conversations that were not always comfortable but consistently clarifying, reinforcing his belief that intimacy thrived on conscious renewal rather than passive continuation. Their group gatherings during this time took on a more contemplative tone, fewer jokes, more pauses, and during one evening walk through a neighborhood lit by sparse holiday decorations, they spoke about loneliness, not as a flaw but as a signal, Rerun admitting that he had always treated loneliness as something to be fixed or avoided, and Dwayne suggesting that loneliness might instead be an invitation to deepen one's relationship with self, while Raj added that acknowledging loneliness openly often diminished its power, transforming it from private shame into shared experience. This reframing resonated deeply, offering a new way to understand winter's emotional landscape, not as a deficit but as a terrain requiring different skills. The concept of making out surfaced again, this time in the context of solitude, and Rerun mused that perhaps making out, in its evolved sense, also included learning how to sit with oneself without rejection, an idea that initially felt strange but gradually made sense, suggesting that intimacy began internally before extending outward. Duane expanded on this by noting that his writing practice had become a form of internal dialogue, a way of meeting himself with curiosity rather than judgment, while Raj reflected that his ability to be alone without retreating emotionally had strengthened his capacity to be present in partnership. Winter also brought external pressures, holidays resurfacing family dynamics and cultural expectations, and Duane navigated these gatherings with newfound clarity, responding to questions about his life with honesty rather than defensiveness, expressing contentment without justification, and while not all reactions were supportive, his own groundedness softened the impact, allowing him to engage without feeling diminished. Rerun faced a different test when well-meaning friends attempted to match him with potential partners, framing his single status as a problem to be solved. And while he appreciated the concern, he gently pushed back, articulating that he was not waiting for completion but engaging in process. A response that surprised him with its confidence, signaling a shift from reactive to intentional living. Raj encountered Winter's pressure through decision points, discussions about future plans gaining urgency as the year's end approached, and instead of defaulting to avoidance or acquiescence, he engaged deliberately, acknowledging uncertainty without allowing it to stall progress. And through these conversations, he discovered that commitment did not require total clarity, only shared willingness to navigate ambiguity together. As the days grew colder, their internal practices deepened, Duane committing to regular solitude not as isolation but as nourishment, Rerun exploring creative outlets without audience, writing thoughts he had never spoken aloud, and Raj balancing closeness with intentional alone time, ensuring that partnership enhanced rather than eclipsed his sense of self. These individual rhythms fed back into their collective dynamic, and during one gathering around a simple dinner, they spoke about endurance, not as grit or stoicism, but as the capacity to remain present through low-intensity phases. And Rerun remarked that Winter had taught him patience, that connection did not always announce itself loudly, and Duane added that patience had revealed subtler forms of satisfaction he might once have overlooked. Raj reflected that this endurance was closely tied to trust in process, in self, and in others, and that such trust reduced the urgency to control outcomes. Making out, now almost an inside joke, emerged once more, this time described by Rerun as the art of staying engaged when nothing spectacular was happening, a comment that drew laughter but also recognition, encapsulating their collective insight that intimacy was less about peaks than continuity. Winter nights continued to stretch, and one particularly cold evening, after a long walk, they paused beneath bare trees silhouetted against the sky, and Duane observed how the absence of leaves revealed structure, branches intertwining in patterns normally obscured, and he suggested that Winter did the same internally, stripping away distractions to reveal core connections, an observation that resonated as metaphor and lived experience. Rerun shared that in his recent solitude, he had begun to feel less fragmented, discovering that without constant external engagement, his internal world felt more coherent, and Raj added that coherence, once established internally, made external relationships feel less precarious, less burdened by unmet needs. Setbacks still occurred, moments when old habits resurfaced, Rerun slipping briefly into performative interactions, Duane retreating into overwork during a stressful week, Raj overanalyzing a disagreement, yet the difference lay in recovery, each man recognizing the pattern sooner, responding with adjustment rather than self-reproach. And this resilience reinforced their confidence in the practices they had cultivated. Winter also offered moments of quiet beauty, shared meals, thoughtful conversations, laughter that emerged without effort, and these moments, though unremarkable on the surface, carried a depth born of presence, illustrating that fulfillment did not require constant novelty. As the season progressed, they began to sense an impending transition, the subtle shift that preceded renewal, and while none of them rushed toward anticipation of spring, they acknowledged that something was being prepared beneath the surface, insights integrating, habits solidifying, making out, in its most distilled meaning, now symbolized this sustained engagement, the willingness to meet life without spectacle, to remain open through contraction as well as expansion, and this philosophy infused their days with a steadiness that felt earned rather than assumed. One evening, as they parted ways after another reflective walk, Rerun remarked that winter had taught him to trust quiet, Dwayne noted that he felt less compelled to prove anything, and Raj observed that intimacy now felt less fragile, more rooted. And as they moved back into their separate lives, winter air sharp against their faces, they carried a shared understanding that this season, often resisted, had offered something essential, a deepening that could not have occurred otherwise. The city continued its rhythm, lights glowing against darkness, people moving through their own winters, and within that vastness, Dwayne, Rerun, and Raj remained quietly engaged, prepared not with answers but with presence, aware that whatever emerged next would be met not with urgency but with the practiced openness that had redefined their understanding of connection. Spring did not arrive all at once but insinuated itself gradually, lengthening the afternoons, softening the air, and reintroducing color in ways subtle enough that Dwayne, Rerun, and Raj almost missed it at first, so accustomed had they become to winter's restraint, and it was precisely this slow transition that tested the endurance they had cultivated, because spring carried with it not only renewal but expectation, the quiet suggestion that something new should happen, that momentum should increase, and each of them felt this pressure differently. Dwayne sensed it in his writing, the pages beginning to fill with forward-looking language, imagined futures, and tentative desires, and while part of him welcomed this shift, another part resisted the implied demand for productivity, prompting him to consciously slow his pace, reminding himself that growth did not require haste, that depth often preceded direction. Rerun experienced spring as temptation, the re-emergence of social energy, invitations multiplying, the familiar thrill of potential connections resurfacing, and he noticed how easily his nervous system responded, a mix of excitement and anxiety, the old urge to chase validation flickering back to life. Yet this time he observed it without immediate obedience, recognizing the pattern and choosing selectively, allowing curiosity without surrendering agency. Raj felt spring most acutely in dialogue, conversations with his partner shifting tone, moving from maintenance toward possibility, discussions of travel, creative projects, and shared aspirations blooming alongside the season, and while this expansion felt affirming, it also required discernment, as he worked to ensure that enthusiasm did not override reflection, that choices emerged from alignment rather than momentum. Their group interactions mirrored this seasonal shift, meetings becoming more animated, laughter more frequent, yet underlined by the steadiness forged during winter, and during one gathering at an outdoor cafe, sunlight catching on glasses and tabletops, they spoke about how renewal often arrived disguised as restlessness, how the desire for change could either signal readiness or mask avoidance, and this conversation unfolded slowly, punctuated by observation rather than conclusion. Rerun admitted that he felt both more open and more cautious. That spring made him want to reach outward while winter had taught him to remain inwardly anchored, and Dwayne suggested that perhaps the task now was integration, learning to carry inward depth into outward motion, while Raj added that integration required ongoing calibration, a willingness to adjust rather than commit prematurely. The phrase making out surfaced again, now framed as a practice of attentiveness during transition, and Rerun joked that spring made everything feel like a first date, charged with promise and projection. But beneath the humor lay insight, the recognition that beginnings often tempted people to abandon presence in favor of fantasy. Dwayne reflected that his earlier relationship patterns had often collapsed under the weight of imagined futures, and that his current discipline lay in staying with what was real rather than what was anticipated, a stance that felt less intoxicating but more sustainable. Raj noted that shared dreams, while important, needed grounding in daily behavior. Otherwise they risked becoming symbolic rather than functional. Spring also introduced friction, the resurfacing of unresolved tensions, and Rerun encountered this when reconnecting with someone from his past, a meeting that initially felt nostalgic but soon revealed familiar dynamics. Old insecurities reactivated, conversational rhythms slipping into performance, and while the experience unsettled him, it also provided clarity, highlighting how much he had changed and how little the dynamic itself had evolved, leading him to step back with gratitude rather than regret. Dwayne faced friction internally, the pull between creative solitude and social engagement intensifying, and he experimented with boundaries, scheduling his time more intentionally, discovering that saying no was not an act of withdrawal but of preservation, allowing him to engage more fully when he did say yes. Raj encountered friction through difference, disagreements emerging not from conflict but from divergence in pace, and instead of smoothing over these moments, he leaned into dialogue, discovering that articulation, even when uncomfortable, strengthened trust, reinforcing the lesson that harmony was not the absence of difference but the capacity to navigate it. As the weeks progressed, spring asserted itself more confidently, and with it came the temptation to measure progress, to assess outcomes, and during one reflective walk, Dwayne voiced concern about whether his practices were leading anywhere tangible, a question that resonated with the others, prompting Rerun to suggest that direction might reveal itself retroactively. That meaning often became visible only after sustained engagement, rather than during it, while Raj added that trust in process was easier to maintain in hindsight than in motion, and that patience was not passive but actively cultivated. This reframing eased the pressure, allowing them to continue without forcing conclusions. Making out, now deeply layered in meaning, was discussed as an orientation toward life itself, an ongoing willingness to remain in contact with experience as it unfolded, resisting both withdrawal and overreach, and Rerun remarked that this orientation had changed how he viewed attraction, shifting focus from intensity to resonance, while Dwayne noted that resonance required listening, not just expression, and Raj observed that resonance deepened over time, revealing itself through consistency rather than spectacle. Spring evenings extended, and with the extra light came opportunities for reflection, conversations lingering longer, thoughts unfolding without urgency, and during one such evening, they spoke about fear, acknowledging that fear did not disappear with growth but changed form, becoming subtler, more sophisticated, and Rerun admitted that his fear now centered less on rejection and more on misalignment, the possibility of choosing something that did not truly fit, while Dwayne shared that his fear involved stagnation, the worry that comfort might dull his edge, and Raj expressed fear of imbalance, of losing himself within shared momentum. Articulating these fears diminished their grip, transforming them from unnamed pressure into navigable terrain. Setbacks continued to occur, moments when spring's energy led to overextension, Rerun agreeing to too much, Dwayne neglecting rest, Raj prioritizing harmony over honesty, yet each setback was met with reflection rather than self-criticism, adjustments made with gentleness, reinforcing the resilience developed during winter. Spring also offered affirmation, small successes that validated their efforts, Dwayne receiving thoughtful Feedback on his work, Rerun enjoying connections that felt mutual rather than performative, Raj experiencing deeper alignment in partnership, and these moments, though modest, carried weight, confirming that presence yielded dividends not always visible but deeply felt. As the season advanced, the city itself seemed to participate in this unfolding, people lingering outdoors, conversations audible through open windows, life reasserting itself, and within this collective movement, Dwayne, Rerun, and Raj maintained their individual rhythms, neither resisting nor chasing the season, but engaging with it consciously. One afternoon, during a spontaneous gathering, Rerun observed that spring had taught him discernment, the ability to say yes without losing no. Dwayne reflected that he felt more grounded even as possibilities expanded, and Raj noted that intimacy now felt less about proximity and more about alignment. Insights that felt earned through cumulative experience rather than sudden revelation. Making out, once a playful phrase, now functioned as shorthand for their shared philosophy, a reminder to stay engaged without abandoning self, to move forward without rushing ahead of awareness. As they parted that day, sunlight low and warm, each carried a quiet confidence, not in outcomes but in capacity, the capacity to remain present through change, to integrate depth with movement, and to trust that whatever unfolded next would be met with the same attentiveness that had carried them from winter's stillness into spring's possibility, a continuity that mattered more than any singular event, grounding them as the season continued to open, inviting but not demanding, offering space for the next phase to emerge naturally from what had already been cultivated. By the time early summer settled in, it brought with it not the dramatic heat of culmination but a steadier warmth that lingered through the day and refused to hurry the evening away, and within this expanded sense of time Dwayne, Rerun, and Raj found themselves confronting a new challenge, not the scarcity of winter or the anticipation of spring, but abundance, the subtle pressure of having more options, more invitations, more light, and more perceived opportunity than before, a condition that tested not their resilience but their discernment, because abundance, they were learning, could be just as disorienting as lack. Dwayne felt this most sharply in his creative life, where ideas now came faster than he could reasonably pursue them, each one carrying its own promise of relevance or fulfillment. And instead of feeling liberated, he noticed a creeping anxiety, the fear of choosing wrongly, of investing deeply in one direction only to discover another path might have been richer, and this realization prompted him to reflect on how indecision could masquerade as openness, leading him to consciously commit to fewer projects with greater presence, reframing choice not as loss but as depth. Rerun experienced abundance socially, his calendar filling with ease, connections flowing naturally, and while this validated his growth, it also resurfaced an old temptation to overextend, to say yes reflexively, equating availability with worth, and it took deliberate effort for him to pause before responding, to check in with his own energy rather than the excitement of being wanted, a practice that felt counterintuitive but increasingly necessary. Raj encountered abundance relationally, as shared plans expanded, possibilities multiplying within partnership, conversations about future directions becoming more frequent and more complex, and he recognized that abundance required negotiation, not just enthusiasm, because shared potential could quickly become shared pressure if not handled with care, leading him to slow the pace of decision-making, ensuring that each step felt chosen rather than assumed. Their conversations during this period often returned to the theme of sufficiency, questioning how much was enough, and during one long evening walk as the sky remained stubbornly light, they discussed how modern life often equated fullness with success, leaving little room to honor restraint. And Rerun admitted that learning to stop, even when things were going well, felt like the final frontier of his personal growth, while Dwayne observed that stopping was not withdrawal but consolidation, a way of allowing experiences to settle into understanding. Raj added that consolidation created stability, preventing growth from becoming fragmentation. The idea of making out resurfaced yet again, now described by Dwayne as staying with one thing long enough to truly know it. Whether that thing was a person, a practice, or a version of oneself, and Rerun laughed at the metaphor but acknowledged its truth, noting that his past patterns had often involved moving on just as intimacy began to deepen, mistaking familiarity for stagnation. Raj reflected that in long-term connection, making out meant returning again and again to attention, choosing engagement not because it was novel but because it was meaningful. Summer also introduced visibility, more public spaces, more chance encounters, and with this visibility came comparison, the quiet assessment of others' lives that could subtly undermine contentment, and Dwayne noticed this during moments of distraction, scrolling through updates that suggested others were achieving milestones more decisively, and while he recognized the illusion inherent in such images, the emotional response lingered, prompting him to limit exposure and re-anchor his sense of progress internally rather than relationally. Rerun felt comparison during group gatherings, noticing how easily social energy could slip into performance, the urge to be entertaining or impressive resurfacing, and when he caught himself exaggerating stories or leaning into persona, he paused, allowing silence to exist without filling it, discovering that authenticity, while less flashy, invited deeper connection. Raj encountered comparison in quieter ways, subtle questions about whether his pace aligned with cultural expectations, and through reflective conversation with his partner, he reaffirmed that alignment mattered more than timing, that fulfillment could not be standardized. As summer progressed, moments of fatigue appeared, not physical exhaustion but emotional saturation, the result of sustained engagement, and each of them responded differently, Dwayne retreating briefly into solitude, Rerun seeking simplicity, stripping his schedule back to essentials, and Raj negotiating space within togetherness. And while these responses initially felt like divergence, they soon recognized them as complementary, each man honoring his own rhythm while maintaining connection, illustrating that intimacy did not require uniformity. Setbacks emerged as well, Rerun overcommitting during a particularly busy week and feeling the familiar crash afterward, Dwayne second-guessing his creative focus after encountering external criticism, Raj avoiding a difficult conversation in favor of preserving ease, and yet what distinguished these moments from earlier phases was their aftermath, the speed with which awareness returned, adjustments made without drama. Self-compassion replacing self-reproach, summer offered its own lessons in impermanence, long days already beginning to shorten almost imperceptibly, reminding them that abundance, like scarcity, was temporary, and during one reflective conversation, Dwayne remarked that perhaps the purpose of abundance was not accumulation but selection, learning what to hold and what to release. A thought that resonated deeply. Rerun added that abundance revealed values, that what one chose under conditions of plenty spoke more honestly than choices made under constraint, and Raj observed that abundance required trust that letting go would not result in loss but create space for alignment. Making out, in this light, became synonymous with choosing deliberately, engaging fully without scattering attention, and this interpretation felt like a culmination of their evolving philosophy, integrating presence, restraint, curiosity, and commitment. Summer evenings continued to stretch, conversations flowing more easily, laughter punctuating reflection, and within these Moments they found affirmation not in intensity but in continuity, the steady companionship that had weathered multiple seasons. One night, as they sat together outdoors, listening to distant city sounds, Rerun observed that for the first time he felt unhurried even amid activity. Dwayne noted that his sense of purpose felt quieter but more stable, and Raj shared that intimacy now felt less like an achievement and more like a practice, something tended rather than attained. These acknowledgments carried weight, marking not an end point but a plateau, a place from which to see both past effort and future possibility. Summer's warmth held them gently, offering space rather than demand, and as the season matured, they sensed that another transition was approaching, not yet visible but already forming beneath the surface. And while none of them knew exactly what it would bring, they felt prepared not through certainty but through capacity, the ability to remain engaged without being overwhelmed, to choose without fear of missing out, and to stay present even as circumstances shifted. Making Out, once a playful title, now encapsulated this capacity fully, a shorthand for sustained attention in a world of distraction, and as they parted that evening, each returning to his own life enriched rather than defined by the others, they carried with them a quiet readiness, aware that whatever emerged next would not require reinvention but application, the continued practice of staying with what mattered as summer slowly edged toward its inevitable close. Late summer began to fold gently into itself, the heat no longer aggressive but tempered, evenings carrying a hint of coolness that suggested conclusion without insisting on it, and within this soft decrescendo Dwayne, Rerun, and Raj found themselves inhabiting a quieter emotional register, not anticlimactic but integrative, as though the years' accumulated insights were settling into muscle memory rather than remaining conscious effort, and it was in this phase that they confronted a final subtle task, learning how to live without constantly naming or narrating their growth, allowing experience to be lived rather than interpreted in real time. Dwayne noticed this shift first when he realized he was writing less about himself and more from himself, his prose no longer circling questions of identity but expressing observations with an ease that suggested internal alignment. And while part of him missed the intensity of self-examination, another part recognized this as maturation. The movement from inquiry to expression, where meaning emerged through action rather than reflection. Rerun experienced a similar transition socially, discovering that he no longer felt compelled to analyze every interaction for significance, enjoying conversations without scanning for validation or outcome, and this ease surprised him, revealing that presence, once cultivated deliberately, could become default, allowing joy to arise unforced and connections to unfold organically. Raj felt the integration most strongly in his partnership, where dialogue now flowed without the earlier need to frame every conversation as work or progress, intimacy expressing itself through shared routines, small gestures, and unspoken understanding, and while challenges still arose, they were met with a confidence born of repetition, the knowledge that engagement itself was sufficient foundation. Their meetings during this period grew less frequent but more resonant, each gathering feeling like a continuation rather than an event, and during one final long walk together, they reflected on how the absence of urgency had changed their relationship to time, Rerun noting that he no longer measured his life by milestones but by moments of coherence, Dwayne observing that satisfaction now came from alignment rather than achievement, and Raj sharing that commitment felt less like a promise about the future and more like a way of inhabiting the present. Making Out, the phrase that had once felt playful and ironic, now surfaced almost tenderly, invoked less often but with deeper meaning, representing not pursuit but presence, the art of staying engaged without needing intensity to justify attention. Late summer also brought endings, not dramatic farewells but natural closures, routines shifting as schedules changed, opportunities passing without regret, and Dwayne felt a quiet gratitude for paths not taken, recognizing that restraint had allowed him to invest fully where he was, while Rerun felt relief in letting certain possibilities dissolve, understanding that not every door needed to be opened to confirm freedom, and Raj felt peace in allowing ambiguity to remain unresolved, trusting that clarity would arrive when needed rather than demanded. Reflection still occurred, but it was gentler, less interrogative, and during one shared meal, they spoke about how effort had gradually transformed into inclination, how practices that once required discipline now felt intuitive. And Rerun laughed at the memory of his earlier restlessness, noting that he still enjoyed excitement but no longer depended on it for self-definition, while Dwayne recalled his fear of stillness and recognized how that fear had softened into appreciation, and Raj reflected on his initial concerns about balance, realizing that balance was not a static state but a responsive process. The city around them mirrored this transition, summer's buzz easing into a steadier rhythm, people moving with less urgency, evenings filled with ambient sound rather than spectacle, and within this environment they found confirmation that life did not require constant escalation to remain meaningful. Setbacks continued to appear, small moments of doubt or impatience, but they passed more quickly now, met with humor or acceptance rather than analysis, signaling that growth had indeed integrated. One evening, as they watched the sky shift colors almost imperceptibly, Dwayne remarked that perhaps the truest measure of change was how little there was to say about it, a thought that resonated deeply, suggesting that when understanding became embodied, language stepped aside. Rerun added that he felt more himself without trying to define who that self was, and Raj observed that intimacy now felt expansive rather than consuming, leaving room for individuality without sacrificing connection. Making out, in its final evolution, became synonymous with this embodied presence. The willingness to remain with life as it was rather than how it might be improved, a stance that felt radical in its simplicity. As summer edged toward autumn, they acknowledged that this chapter of their shared journey was naturally concluding, not ending in separation but in integration, each carrying the insights into their own trajectories, and while there was a hint of nostalgia, it was tempered by gratitude, the sense that what mattered had been received. On their last intentional gathering, they did not attempt to summarize or commemorate, instead sharing ordinary conversation, laughter arising easily, silence comfortable, and in this ordinariness they recognized the fulfillment they had been seeking all along. When they eventually parted that night, the air cooler, stars faintly visible, there were no promises to maintain the same frequency of contact, only an implicit trust that connection did not require constant reinforcement to remain real. Dwayne returned home and wrote not about the evening but from it. Rerun walked without headphones, savoring the ambient sounds, and Raj returned to shared space with a renewed sense of ease, and in these separate actions the continuity of their bond was evident. The story of making out, which had begun as exploration and evolved into philosophy, now resolved into practice, a lived orientation toward attention, choice, and presence. And while life would continue to offer new challenges, seasons, and transitions, they felt equipped not with answers but with a way of engaging that rendered answers secondary. Late summer closed softly around them, not marking an end but completing a cycle, and within that completion lay the quiet confidence that whatever followed would be met not with urgency or avoidance, but with the same sustained openness that had carried them through, an openness that no longer needed a name, having become simply the way they lived.